Hello, you're through to Books Boys. You've got Dean on the line. Who's calling?
Chris Bishop, author of The Prodigal Son.
First of all, what a coincidence. We were just talking about The Prodigal Son. I read it there last week. I read it on my holidays in Madrid, actually.
Oh,
And
that's
I
good.
sat in a lovely park with little rowboats around, and I read the book, and I absolutely loved it.
Oh, good.
Um, Now, this is the fifth in the series, The Shadow of the Raven. This is the final one as well. Am I right?
That's correct. It is.
Yeah. Okay.
I have said that before. I said that about book three, but but no, it is the final one.
Now, I haven't read the previous books. Very helpfully, you do start with a little couple of page kind of summary of book four, so I was able to get up to speed. So you mentioned there that you were thinking about stopping after book three. Are books four and five kind of self-contained, or would it be helpful to read the whole thing?
I think all the books are written to be read as standalone stories, so you
Mm.
don't need to have read anything. Well, I hope you found that to be the case with book
Yeah.
five. Um, but the series lends itself into two parts. Books one to three concern the main character there. Is a young boy who's of noble birth and put into the church, as often the case with the youngest son.
Sure.
But he has to set his religion aside and become a warrior because he gets embroiled in the Battle of Edington and Alfred's problems with the Vikings. So it's quite a long story. Books two and three sort of follow on his adventures from there.
Right.
Book four introduces his illegitimate son, whose mother was a prostitute. And although Alfred knows the family well and is pretty sure this is genuinely Matthew's son, he can't be absolutely sure. So he takes him in as a stable boy. And then at a certain point, he decides, well, got to see how he gets on. And he sends
Yeah.
him to Wareham on the pretext of training Fleet, which is a magnificent black stallion thought to be unrideable. From there, Edward excels and gradually develops skills as a warrior and culminates in the prodigal son.
Mm. Okay. So that gets us up to speed. And you're right. I mean, all that I really needed was that little introduction, that little bit, the story so far. And I said, okay, I know what's happened in book four, and now I can read book five, as a standalone. So that was great. You
Good.
mentioned Alfred. So Lord Alfred, he's the king essentially. So is he supposed to be literally Alfred the Great, the actual historical king of the Anglo-Saxons? Because the time period matches up as well.
Oh yes, no, he is. He is.
Yeah.
At least he's supposed to be. Very difficult because we don't have very much historical evidence.
Mm.
Most of the contemporary accounts are written by, well, the victor, not the vanquished. Alfred was both in different parts, but certainly what we know of Alfred has come from Alfred or from his advisors putting things down in writing. So there are big gaps to fill in. And I've done that as hopefully as accurately as I can.
No, that's fair. So we're in 893 in Wessex, and I looked it up and said, yep, that is the right time period for Alfred the Great. And it's quite interesting because you can kind of start there and go almost until really today with this constant lineage of the English throne. So it's really, really interesting.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Fantastic to have that level of documentation. So our main chap is Edward then. He's the illegitimate son. But at this point, by the time we're in book five, it's more or less accepted that he's the son, and
Yes.
he's the main character now for us.
Yes.
And he has his uncle Edmund, who spent a long period of time, was it 10 years, 15 years, on as a Viking slave?
Yes, he was taken right at the beginning of book one and taken into slavery, as was his sister, Edwina. They all have this, Saxons tended to have a name that begins with the first letter of their father. So, you never get Edward Edmund, which gets a bit confusing. So I have to be very careful not to confuse the reader. But yes, Edmund starts out as a good guy, but clearly after 15 odd years of slavery, he's not too enamored with life. And he sees Edward as perhaps stepping in and taking the family fortune, which he thinks he has a right to. Hence the conflict there.
Yeah. So he's come back and he's out to kind of get what's his essentially. Meanwhile, Edward, Yeah, he's trained fleet at this point. He's riding the horse magnificently, and very impressive. He's made a lot of friends in Wareham. He seems to be getting on really well, and he's begun courting is it Odelia, this nice lady.
Adelia.
Yeah,
Yes.
she's a bit of a coquette with him at times, you know. She's kind of not wanting to go too far, not wanting to say yes, I will accept your proposal, but you know, you got to go jump through a bunch of hoops and then we'll see, you know, and not kind of
Yes.
not wanting to make any promises, you know.
No. She puts him through a hard time, doesn't she? Really? Yeah.
She does a little bit, yeah, she does. But at the same time, she's kind with him, and even when he visits the prostitute, she just rules a line under it, you know, which is fair enough. Because I suppose Edward is a very naive chap, really. I mean, he grew up as as a stable boy, so he doesn't have that much life experience. And they say, well, he doesn't know anything about, you know, what he's supposed to do with his wife when he gets one. So we better send him to this prostitute just to learn a little bit about what goes on, you know. It's quite funny.
Yeah, you've got the added problem that when Edward first meets her, he's a stable boy and she's the daughter of the governor of Wareham.
So she's way above him. Yeah.
Gradually, he overtakes her. Suddenly, he's likely to become a lord in due course, and she's just the daughter of the governor. You know, so their roles almost reverse.
Yeah, and that's very, very interesting to see their development because they have a good connection with each other, and I think that they're both, whether she admits it always openly or not, they're both happy that they're kind of in love and they're going to end up together. Even though their positions reverse, they don't really let it affect them, which is nice to see, you know. But you're right, by in the beginning, it is kind of he's beneath her, and by the end, it's like, well, he's actually going to probably become the governor here and then also become a lord somewhere else, you know, in other more lands and grow, and she's just going to be stuck here. Which is good. I don't want to give too many spoilers, but I do want to ask you a question. I'll try to phrase it sort of generally. Do you believe that Edmund does repent or not? Is it just a sham?
I think it's a sham, but I think there may be some guilt going on there. I think suddenly he has to sort of confront reality and destiny. And I think at that point he might begin to think, maybe I got this wrong, you know. I think I want to go further than that because, as you say, it's part of the tension there is how does he really feel? He's a strange character, isn't he, really?
Yeah.
I mean, again, he's had quite a rough time. I think as Ed points out at one stage, you know, he started out part of a very noble family. You know, his father was an alderman. He was taken as a slave. He's been through hell.
Yeah.
He manages to escape by skin of his teeth, really, and suddenly, you know, he finds that someone else has stepped in, someone he wouldn't have known anything about because he wouldn't have known Matthew in books 1, 2, and 3. So he might have known of him, but he wouldn't know much more than that.
So I think really, because initially you see him as, okay, he's the villain, right? You know, but then there are more complexities, and once you get the backstory, you kind of think, I can see where he's coming from. You know, he was taken away. He's just escaped, and now he's thinking, you know, I'm going to come back and take what I assumed was going to be mine. Like, it's totally understandable. But of course, Edward is just like, well, we'll have a chat about it. We'll work it out. We'll share it all. But Edward's very naive, you know, and Edmund's trying to kill him. You know, so
that's what he did. Yeah, did trying to kill him. Yeah.
For Edward, it's very nice. So that's where we start, you know, in the story so far. That first page, we kind of start with Edmund had tried to get an assassin to kill Edward, thinks that it worked, but it didn't, and then killed the assassin. So he certainly has a taste for it, you know.
Yes, he's ruthless, isn't he, really?
He is. And then he joins, of course, Byram and his band of, well, I like to think of them as the band of merry men, but this kind of robber band out in the woods.
Yeah.
And we've got a Viking, we've got a giant, we've got guys with injuries and everything, and Winifred, who's of course turns out to be the prostitute's mother, but she's just kind of living with them in the woods. They're an interesting ragtag kind of bunch of chaps.
Did you like them as characters?
I did, yeah, I did, and I especially, again, I'm not going to spoil it, but I like that one of them has a nice kind of story towards the end. So that was nice, but they're good characters.
Good.
What was the was that all, you know, the way it goes, it doesn't really work out well for them. I suppose for most of them that was inevitable, really. They were outcasts, weren't they?
I think That's the word I would use. It was an inevitable ending for them.
Yeah.
That perhaps the two who got away were lucky.
Yeah.
Cedric and I suppose that not so much the boy, because well, I better not say, but his life looks pretty rough from where he's standing. He hasn't been executed, but it's a pretty rough road ahead of him.
Yeah, I think Cedric's the only one that goes well for.
Yes, yes.
But that was nice because, in the beginning, I just saw them as a homogenous group, but then you do get to see them individually a little bit more. And then I'm kind of rooting for Cedric at the end. So it's nice to have one of them and say, okay, because it's similar to Edmund. Really, none of them wanted to necessarily be there. It's just the route that their life had put them on,
One of my victims of circumstance, really, weren't they? Yeah. I mean, you have to feel a certain amount of sympathy for the way their lives turned out, because they didn't have a lot of choices.
No,
simple as that.
And it was certainly a tough life. But one of my favorite characters, I think, is actually Father Cuthbert. Because he's introduced just this, and even Edmund says, you priests are out swindling people and whatever else, and he's this fat priest coming through with his guard in a little cart. So he robs him, makes him strip naked, kind of humiliates him, sends him on his way to the village. But the whole time, Cuthbert is a bit of a coward as well. He makes no attempt to stand up for himself. And even later, when they think the Vikings are going to come, he's like, "Oh, it's about time I got going back to my own parish, then."
Yes.
And they say, "Oh, off you go. We can't lend you any guards, but off you go." It's like, "Oh, I might stay put for a little while then, if there's no guards."
Yeah, a coward is right, isn't it? Really. I mean, he dodged everything, didn't he?
Yeah. He's a funny coward,
Yeah.
What becomes of him? I don't think we really go into any detail with him. He just goes back to his parish, and he's happy.
He goes back to his parish. He returns to Winchester, which was then the capital of certainly of Wessex and probably of England, really. But yes, he just toddles off to his parish from there.
Off he goes. Well, this is the 5th book, and you've said it's not the first time you've said it's the last one, but on the assumption that it is the last one, what's next? Are you going to write something different? Have you got any ideas?
I've got lots of ideas. I suppose the one which is actually, if I finish writing it, it will be almost a prequel to book 1. The events leading up to the Battle of Edington, which was a very significant battle. I mean, it was probably one of the most important ever fought on British soil, because of Alfred being defeated at Edington. That's it. We'd have had a Danish ruler. We got a Danish ruler in the end. In fact, our own royal family are directly descended from the Normans, which is basically is Norsemen. They were Danes.
Yeah.
I might try something completely different. I don't know. I need a bit of a rest. 5 books in 5 years is a lot to have taken on. So we'll see. But I'd like to carry on. Yes, I'd like, and I've got lots of ideas in my head about what could be done.
So, is this something you always wanted to do? Did you write before this series, or did you just focus on your other career first and then get to this?
It was my life's ambition to write a book.
Right.
One day I thought to myself, well, I used to publish short stories here and there, and I wrote a series for a windsurfing magazine. One of my passions was to windsurf. And I wrote a regular column for a windsurfing magazine, and I won a competition in the Times for a rather futuristic story. But it was always to write a book. And then one day I thought, well, retirement's looming, time getting on a bit. Let's do it. I was only going to write 1 book, but here we are.
You've ended up with 5.
Yeah, ended up with 5, yes.
But the first one's going to be the hardest, because you don't know if you have it in you to do a full novel. And then once you know you can do it, then it's like, oh, cool, so do another couple,
Yes. It took a long time to write, but funnily enough, if you look at my website, there's an interesting story there that I wasn't writing a novel at that point. I was going to write a short story for a competition about a team of archaeologists who discover the grave of a boy in a rather remote and lonely place. So the story is really a sort of time team thing where the archaeologists weren't agreed on what happened and why he was there. So I needed to create a backstory for that character. Once I did, it just sort of came out. It was almost as though he was sort of guiding my pen as to what happened next. And I looked up, look, actually, I've written a novel here, or my best part, and but I've had a lifelong interest in Anglo-Saxon history, so I have plenty of information for that.
I was going to ask you that. So
needed.
that was an area, it wasn't an arbitrary choice. That was something you'd studied before, you had an interest in.
It's fascinating me. I read Hereward the Wake at school, and that got me started on it, and I've always enjoyed it since. So it still needs lots of research. I mean, the books are heavily researched. I really did go into a lot of detail. Some of it, guesswork,
Yeah, you got to fill in some gaps.
Yeah. Particularly the Vikings, because they didn't write anything down. And what we've got about the Vikings is really archaeological evidence. So, you can't say, oh, well, look, he said this or he said that. We don't know. We don't know what they were. And there's no such thing as Vikings as such. Vikings was a lifestyle choice. There's no people who were Vikings. There were people who used to Viking for a living. That's what it was, a verb. They went out and pillaged and stole and so forth.
It was more an occupation than a cultural group of people.
A lifestyle choice, I think, is the current sort of phrase.
There. So I'll let you go. Do you want to quickly give us a plug for your website or where people can go and buy the book?
Yes, it's on Amazon. That's the best place, I think. My website is chrisbishopauthor.com. And you'll find quite a lot of other blogs about the Anglo-Saxon period. All 5 books are there. There's links through to purchase them via Amazon.
Cool.
And there's also another series I've been working on about fly fishing, which is another passion of mine. And there's a few examples of that there. Don't know where they're going, but they're up there for the.
Fair enough. I'll put a link to the website in the show notes anyway. Last question that we ask everyone before we let you go. If there's any existing book that you wish you'd been the person to write, what would it be?
That's a hard one. I suppose, given how much it influenced me, Hereward the Wake. I thought it was a fabulous story, but it's aimed at, I suppose it's aimed at younger people, but I read it and was just enthralled by it. A lot of books at that time in my life, The Lost World, Conan Doyle, King Solomon's Mines, those sort of classics, those exciting classics, are what I like to read. Contemporary books, I don't do a lot of reading now because I do too much writing.
Too much writing,
yeah. But no, I think they would be the sort of genres that I'd be looking at.
Okay, fair. Well, Chris, it's been a pleasure. Thanks very much for calling in, and I love the book. So if you do release anything else, maybe take a year off, but when you get to it, I'll certainly check it out.
Lovely. Thanks.
Take care.
Bye.